never give up. I never give up. I never give up.
Hi guys, welcome back to Neff Inspiration, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stephan Neff. Another fantastic day for an interview because my guest today is tackling something that is far too close to my heart, and it's called a bloody imposter syndrome. And I'm the classic example for it. She is a woman, Tati Garcia is a woman who is going out there and is helping high-functioning people to function even higher. So she's the perfect wing woman to be by your side, to go out there, kick ass, and actually become the best version of yourself. And I can't wait because there's so many things we need to talk about when it comes to my own life. No doubt I will learn a lot today. So Tati, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephan. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. So there you were, 16 years old, trying to figure out who do I want to be? And you thought it, yes, that's it. I become a life coach. I'm going to be there for high-performing anxiety people. No. What was your story? How did you start getting into that particular field?
Yeah, so I decided I was interested in psychology and understanding more about the human mind, why we do things the way we do, why certain people can have difficult experiences and it really negatively impacts them, and other people can have challenging experiences and they are able to do well. And that was kind of like the crux of what inspired me to go into psychology. And then I ended up going to graduate school for mental health counseling, became a licensed therapist or licensed professional counselor. And when kind of like before grad school, I actually discovered that I had anxiety myself. I had never really understood what it was. You know, back when I was in high school, it wasn't something that was talked about, especially the way that it is nowadays. So I didn't even know what anxiety was until I really started struggling with it through, you know, panic attacks and intense fear and worry. And I started to go to the college counseling center. And then kind of fast forward to when I had gotten my license, when I started to practice therapy, I realized that I was in this place, and it was something that I had been struggling with for a while, but the light bulb didn't really turn on until I started to understand more about it. I came across this phrase of high functioning anxiety. And it's really this description of somebody who is performing well, successful on the outside, but that's contrasted on the inside with a lot of overthinking, self-doubt, insecurity, putting a lot of pressure on yourself and really high expectations. And that really resonated with my experience of kind of like the experience of white knuckling it through things. Like you're doing well, you're successful, but you're white knuckling it.
Can you stop describing me? Can you stop that? I'm taking the full house here. Come on.
Yeah. And then, you know, I think when I heard about it, I realized that it wasn't just me that was feeling that way. And then that was what kind of inspired me to want to help other people. Once I understood more about it and used my own therapeutic background and training and learned and read a lot, I then wanted to help other people, because this is kind of like, it's a very specific like niche, I guess, like within anxiety, and there's specific needs that individuals who are more ambitious and you know, high achieving have, compared to more of just like the general needs that somebody with anxiety may have.
I like that. I like that a lot. And there are many of us who are like that. I'm an anesthetist. I work with surgeons, with theater nurses. So there's a distinct group of people that I've got the privilege to work with, and virtually all of them are exactly the same, driven, expecting 100% as the absolute minimum, And oh my God, if you make a mistake, the whips are coming out and you're whipping yourself bloody. And I mean, I guess it's a really nice thing that I can reassure patients. Yes, we are looking after you because we want to be doing the right thing. But at the same token, it's an adrenaline forest. It's quite a challenge at times to go to work, especially when you're maybe not feeling your best, when you're not feeling on top of the world because, I've got a cold or so much other crap is happening in your life.
Mhm.
Wow. Do you have any inkling how many people out there are suffering actually from this type of high functioning anxiety?
I actually don't, because the thing is, and hopefully this is changing, but there hasn't been much research done specifically on this. There's many statistics when it comes to anxiety in general. But when it comes to high functioning anxiety, there's not much research and statistics. I actually spoke with somebody a few months ago who was a college or graduate student in India who she said, "Oh, I'm doing research on high functioning anxiety." I was like, "That's excellent. Like, I want to see more research being done so that
Exactly.
then we can have just more of an understanding."
The problem, of course, is that people like, well, you and me, we are not really going out there and say, I've got high functioning anxiety, yay. We are very good in hiding that because as being that 100% personality, that means you have got these facade, these masks on. You are hiding any kind of blemish from the world. And unfortunately, it's only 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning that finally you wake up and whoever is in your head is playing you the worst of your life. Watch now. So do you still get that?
Yeah, fortunately, not as much
Yeah,
as I used to. It's very much less frequently and more I'm woken up in the middle of the night with like ideas and inspiration, which is great. So,
exactly.
but yeah, that can definitely happen. I think oftentimes it's like right before bed or in the middle of the night when everything feels just terrible. Like you'd have just the worst like dread inspiring thoughts.
So much so. And that is such a weird thing. So I think it is far more prevalent out there. And if I was to make my colleagues, all of them, sit down and watch this video, then virtually everyone would probably nod quietly and would agree to your assessment or to just you listing the features that we often see in people like us. So if you wanted to actually put maybe a bit more explanation on it, we are talking often about this imposter syndrome, but how would you explain it to someone, to a friend who is not into psychology?
Yeah. So imposter syndrome is essentially when you have this fear that you're not really qualified to be where you are, to be in the position that you're in, or, the profession, or, whatever your circumstances, you have this fear, this worry that people are going to find out that you're a fraud or you actually shouldn't be here or you've just been kind of faking it and you don't know what you're talking about. And it can be this really strong fear that negatively impacts the way that you show up or the way that you feel in your day to day.
Where does it come from? What is your personal take on that?
Yeah, I think that it comes from, well, one concept that has really helped me to understand imposter syndrome more is this concept known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. So it's this concept where, the less knowledgeable somebody is about a topic, then the more they tend to overestimate their abilities. And then it gets to a point where the more knowledgeable you become, it's basically the idea that the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So when people become more knowledgeable, they tend to underestimate their abilities.
Oh.
And so, it's like the person that's just getting to know something and feels really confident about their knowledge versus the person who's actually an expert and feels like, well, there's so much more I could know about this topic. And then as a result, they start to doubt themselves.
Beautiful, beautiful said, and I think that is very true. And again, for those of you out there who think, there is a beautiful statement that 50% of the things that we take for granted today as scientific facts will be disproven in about 10 years' time. That statement was made 1956 by the dean of Harvard University. Nowadays, it's not 10 years, probably 5 years or even less. So that is something that we take nowadays, that we accept that things are changing in a very rapid way with our understanding of life, etc. But that even plays into that, because I realize that and think, oh shit, I need to do more research, or need to read more papers, or need to do X, Y, Z at a time when I'm already working 12 hours, 14 hours or something like that. So it's interesting. So times are certainly changing. Our awareness is changing of the reality of what we know and what we don't know. Bloody hell. So it's beautifully said.
Exactly.
Having said that, I mean, how much are there influences there when it comes to ACEs, so to adverse childhood experiences? Do you think that that there is some influence there, that there is some link there?
Yeah, I think that, from the research I've done on imposter syndrome, they had said there's no link necessarily found with mental health struggles or anything like that. However, I think just anecdotally, it's coming from somewhere. It's often coming from a lack of confidence. And I think that, of course, those adverse childhood experiences, if you felt like maybe you weren't supported in childhood, or if you experienced any sort of trauma, or if you had any experiences where you were bullied or received negative feedback or criticism, then that can certainly lay the foundation to be more likely to experience that imposter syndrome in the future.
When I think back that my parents initially sort of didn't think that I was the brightest light bulb in the drawer, so they put me in the German system into sort of kind of middle grade school, where you're sort of expected to maybe become, I don't know, maybe more a handyman, maybe more into a trade, maybe factory work or something like that. And initially, I was certainly not showing any signs of brightness, but at some stage, the lights went on, and I actually got really addicted to learning. And suddenly, I became the best at school. But it meant that I had to go to a different school to actually get the entrance abilities for university. And so I constantly wanted to, I guess, disprove my parents. This was not a conscious thing. I just wonder with hindsight how much that played in my own life, had played that a role. This kind of he's not so bright. That's go for a nice straight young man. This kind of thing. Not sure. I'm sure it's so much more multifactorial rather than one link. But I think as many things in life, things build up and pictures appear and core beliefs appear at some stage. And I think, the influences that we've seen as young children up to the age of 7 will certainly influence quite a bit how we later function, and the core beliefs that subconsciously drive us. I guess that is the big question mark that is happening often underneath our behaviors. Goodness
Absolutely.
gracious. Bloody hell.
Yeah.
So here you were. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
No. You had brought up something about that desire to prove yourself. And I think that that's something that can happen often in, if you felt as though maybe you didn't get recognized or receive praise, or, the encouragement that we all, especially as children, need and crave, then sometimes we can seek that out in other ways in adulthood. We can try to fill that hole of like feeling like I'm not good enough because maybe we didn't receive that encouragement as a child through external accomplishments, through achievements, or through titles or degrees, or anything else to try and help us feel like, okay, I've proven myself now.
Yet enough is never enough.
Exactly.
It is this need for external validation because of your own insecurities is such a vicious cycle. Please, I remember working really hard for my first exam in anesthesia to become an anesthetist. And I finished the exam at lunchtime on a Wednesday, I think. And Wednesday afternoon, immediately I went into the part 2 teaching course to go for the next one. So it was, I didn't celebrate. So is that a common thing that people who have got imposter syndrome or high functioning anxiety, that they don't really observe their wins and observe their achievements?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because exactly like you said, it's just from one thing to the next. And that time isn't taken to recognize what you have accomplished. And so it can feel oftentimes like you're starting at square one. And I think that's what can also lead to that imposter syndrome, because you've kind of forgotten all of the things you already know and that you've done well. And so you feel like you're kind of just showing up, having to prove yourself all over again.
Exactly. So where the hell is this need coming from? And that's in some of us, it is so strong. You could really call it pathological, really abnormally strong. Yes, you could say at some stage, okay, maybe they were a childhood experience, they were not so great. And yes, maybe you're a bit of anxious, but this can become an obsession. Why does it come to that in some people?
Yeah, I think that is, of course, very unique. It's going to depend on the specific person. I think sometimes it can be just those patterns of thinking that become reinforced throughout your life. Especially if it's grounded in fear or anxiety or unworthiness, then it can be coming, like you mentioned before, from those core beliefs. And so then if we have experiences that reinforce those core beliefs, like, oh, this person that I was talking to asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to, that must mean that I'm really not qualified to be here. Then we're going to be hypersensitive to those moments and then kind of pick up on them and disregard the pieces of information that support that we actually are doing well, we actually are qualified. It's that negativity bias that we have as humans that we tend to, and especially when you're more prone to anxiety or you're in a place of struggling with imposter syndrome, that's going to be amplified. You're going to kind of hone in on the negative pieces of information that reinforce those negative beliefs you have about yourself, rather than all of the probably many more positive experiences and reinforcement that you're experiencing. It's like hyper focusing on the one criticism you receive versus all of the positive feedback.
I love that. Wow, you're so right. But it typically takes events or something to rattle your cage for you to get out of your own rat race. Because when we're in this kind of craziness, we often don't see it. How was it in your own life? Can you remember the moment or a series of events that led you to suddenly get that aha moment?
So for me, I think it's been different moments depending on what the struggle was. Sometimes it can be things that kind of show up at different levels of like stages of going into, let's say, going into business or, starting a new offer or whatever. But if I were to think back to one kind of catalyst for many of the changes that occurred. It was when I was at my previous job before I became self-employed, and I reached a state of burnout. And I was just struggling with feeling insecure and feeling imposter syndrome in myself, because I felt like I was so overwhelmed with work and responsibility, and it was so overwhelming and stressful and anxiety provoking for me. And it took a point where I just kind of like they put it, like you snap, like it was a regular daily request. And like, I went from 0 to 100 of just, it was a phone call that I got. I remember I was driving my car, and I remember I was fine on the phone, but then when I got off, I got like so angry, and probably being behind the wheel of a car was not the best place to be. But then I got home, and afterwards I was like, this isn't like normal. This isn't okay that a job is getting me to this point. Something needs to change. And so that it was in that moment that I really made the decision to leave that job, and basically said, like, this isn't good for me. This isn't good for my mental health. And that started my, not only, business journey, but also more of my personal development journey. And so it maybe wasn't necessarily specific to imposter syndrome, but it was that kind of like just confluence of the high functioning anxiety bubble, I guess I was in.
Oh, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. But I think there is, of course, this pitfall that when something goes pear-shaped, even when you come to a point where you are starting to break apart, there is still resentment and anger. And it often enough, we focus that on, again, the same external things. See what they have done to me. Look, because of them, I am here, kind of a story. And it is one thing to break apart. It is another thing to break apart and recognize this as an opportunity to heal. So I commend you. I mean, you got that right. Did you get it right the first time around, or did you need a few reminders that, hey, maybe I need to look after myself a bit better?
Yeah, I think that it's never a linear journey. So, I think I got it, I guess, right, if you would say, also because of, this is what I studied. And so I have that like increased awareness of it. So I've always, and I'm like a voracious learner. So, I'm always trying to learn more. And maybe that's like the high achieving part of like, okay, I need to know more and more and more. And then there are always those moments where I catch myself and kind of need to take a step back and reassess. And I think that's just a natural part of the growth process, where sometimes it's, one step, one step forward, 2 steps back, or something like that. But there's the typical ups and downs of, that everybody experiences.
You're so right. But it's beautiful that you say that, because I think that's so important that we all recognize that. And it's for you and me, we two are pretty much preaching to the converted, because we have been through so many challenges in our own lives, as well as ferocious learners. I think I might steal that, because that I was always addicted to learning. Every day where I don't learn something is a sad day. So for me, and that's not high functioning overachiever kind of thing. That's just my thirst for knowledge and realizing how beautiful knowledge can be, especially when you then apply it practically in your own life and that of others. That's a blessing. That's a privilege. That's fantastic for me. But many people who are probably listening here or viewing us here on YouTube might not be in that situation yet. And I think that is so important, that when everything is too much and you're really just white knuckling it and barely holding on to things, then that is the moment when you're actually about to break through, if you let yourself. You can break down or break up, so to speak, or get ready, because ultimately the pain within you has become so strong that you simply must take action. The problem is that many people don't know what to do. And sometimes that action, that energy is exploding into violence, into negative forms of release. Whilst at the same token, if you imagine it, you have got a bow and arrow and you have pulled so far back that there is no more left to pull. You just now need to find the compass to actually say, well, where do I want to go? I think that is what this opportunity gives you. So every breakdown that you have got, every burnout that you have got, is such a beautiful chance to reassess. Sometimes life throws you the problems of an injury. You've been working, and then something goes pear-shaped and you need a shoulder operation. And now you're 6 weeks in a sling and you can't work. And for many of the men and women, typically men, that are anesthetized, for them, the world stops. I mean, it's just, my God, I'm a man who, they define themselves by being a man, being active, doing manly things all day round. And if they stop, then they're lazy. And you've got all those negative things then coming out. My goodness. And I see this as a huge privilege. How can we rephrase that? How could you rephrase that in your profession as a coach, as a psychologist? How can we rephrase those things from a negative to a positive, or reframe, shall I say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what you pointed out was key, that many times our identity can be very wrapped up in what we do, in, whether it is your profession or whether it is your body and what it allows you to do. And so that can then, when that is no longer available, or, I work with many clients who are on the cusp of retirement, and that's a big struggle for them. Like, they've defined themselves their entire lives by their career, and now they're about to retire. So what next? Who are they? What is their identity? It becomes very wrapped up in what we do. And, what can really help is, and something that I really promote, is the concept of balance. And so, of course, I help people with work-life balance, and that kind of ties to what I discussed with burnout, but not just when it comes to work-life balance, but just balance when it comes to an understanding of how you are identifying yourself and also spending your time, where, if we go all in on one thing, and many times for those ambitious individuals, it's going all in on work, then you're not taking time to cultivate maybe the relationships in your life, to cultivate your own interests and personal hobbies, or, whatever else it could be. And so I think that when it comes to that identity piece, it can be really valuable to understand more about, like, that your identity is multifaceted, that it's not just about what you do or what you can do or how busy you are, how much you accomplish, but it's also about many other things, about who you are to other people, about, what it is that you're passionate about. And, you mentioned learning, that can be something that is a value or very important for many people.
Beautifully said. And I think that is the problem, is certainly that addiction for external validation was certainly quite pathological for me. And it was, I think I was really swinging the pendulum way to one side there. And when I then crashed and burned and actually ended up in rehab, I really struggled. I had no clue who I really was, leave alone even who I wanted to be. And it was quite bizarre. But then at the same token, once I left rehab, I began to realize that this is such a huge opportunity, because it was like having an empty canvas, and you can start painting a new picture. And it's up to you which colors you use and what kind of themes you use and how that picture will look like. This is a huge opportunity that so many people don't see when medical events happen or when life events happen, and they are suddenly forced to stop, forced to relook at themselves. And I think that is a huge opportunity that we must promote as being exactly that. Because up until that point, you probably have drunken too much alcohol, too little water, smoking, eat shit, that you have not looked after yourself, your sleep hygiene was lousy. Shall I keep going? Yeah, okay. I've just described probably a vast majority of people around me. And then it's only when we actually start getting on this path of self-discovery, of beginning to love ourselves, warts and all, that we actually give us more freedom, give us more understanding, give us more love. How do retired, high-functioning CEOs respond to the concept of self-love? I'm sure you must get a lot of, what is she on about?
Yeah, it can be a journey to get there. It's breaking down a lot of the behaviors and patterns and beliefs that have accumulated over a lifetime, that just, it starts to become an unconscious way of being that, many times these individuals feel like I need to always be busy. I need to always be checking things off a list. And like you mentioned, they're not even like stepping back or having the space to think about or recognize if that's serving them or not. And as you were describing that, like reaching that point where, it's an opportunity, it's a blank slate, that made me think of this saying that I heard from one of my previous mentors, that change happens when the discomfort of where you are is greater than the discomfort of where you want to be. And so many times it does take recognizing that where you are isn't serving you. And that starts with awareness. I always say that awareness is the first step. You can't change what you aren't aware of. So starting to become more aware of, from an outside perspective or just from an objective perspective, how are you treating yourself? How do you speak to yourself? How are you spending your time, and does it align with really what's important to you?
Oh, very wisely said, isn't it? And this awareness is like going to the gym. You can't go to the gym once, lift a few weights and say, hey, now I'm fit. That's the same in my experience. It is this habit, creating habits. And one of the habits is to actually stop and feel and think and actually see what has occurred. And instead of shooting from the hip and responding, constantly reacting rather than actually stopping and acting. That took me a hell of a long time. And I still haven't mastered it, but I think after 10 years, I'm much stronger in that department now. And funnily enough, just prior to coming onto the show, we were sort of thinking about I was thinking about high performing anxiety. I was wondering, when was the last panic attack I had? That's actually months ago now. And I have to say, exactly. But the question then immediately arose, well, why? And I've got my answers. I've got them ready. I've figured them out. But I wonder. I'm rephrasing that to you. What would you tell someone? What are your steps of getting someone who is to a degree in paralysis due to the analysis that he is constantly doing? How would you help someone like that? Where do you start?
So somebody with panic attacks, you're saying?
Well, high functioning anxiety, basically. I need to go. I go. And then, from now and then they sit on the toilet, go, their thoughts racing like a fast forward film. That kind of scenario sounds rather familiar to me, actually. So
So I think that, first I start with getting to the root and getting to the root of what's really reinforcing and keeping this cycle going. So when I say the cycle, it's the cycle of how you're thinking, feeling, and behaving, because those are all influencing each other. The way that we think about things, even though they can feel like facts, like, if I drop the ball on this, then everything's going to fall apart. That can feel really real and really scary. Or, if I don't prove myself to my boss, then he's going to think that I'm a fraud or I don't know what I'm doing. And so looking at it and becoming aware, like I mentioned before, of the way that you think and whether those thoughts are accurate or inaccurate. Many times they are not accurate, and we speak terribly to ourselves, and we can be really hard on ourselves. And it's only making us feel worse and more fearful, more anxious, more insecure. You mentioned, sitting with and becoming aware of your emotions. That's a big piece, because many times we all have emotions all throughout the day, and that's a part of being human. And our emotions are there in order to drive us to take action, in order to influence us in some way. But if we keep pushing through and not acknowledging those emotions, and we keep ignoring them, that's when it comes out in ways like you mentioned, like drinking, or like, binge eating, or, needing to numb out your mind with TV or scrolling through social media. And so starting to become more aware of and learning just the basics of understanding your emotions is a huge piece in that as well, because that's something that unfortunately many of us, myself included, weren't taught about. We weren't taught in school, okay, this is what your emotions mean and this is how you deal with them. We should have been, because, that's a valuable piece of being human.
Yep.
And then also, if getting to those points, sometimes it can be too much to try and think your way out of things. If you're in a state where you're really on the brink of extreme panic or anxiety, and that's when it can be beneficial to go through your body. And so what I mean by that is doing things to communicate to your body that, you don't need to be in this elevated state of, fight or flight, of, extreme panic and anxiety. And so those can be things like taking deep breaths, or, doing yoga or meditation, or, any other sort of physiological action or behavior that's going to start that feedback loop of communicating to your brain that it's okay to let the guard down. It's okay to not white knuckle it. And that's when we can start doing the work of addressing your thoughts and emotions.
Beautiful. I think for me, I see nowadays anxiety attacks or heightened levels of anxiety as a sign that I did not love my body as much as it deserves. In other words, typically it's the hungry, have I actually looked after my nutrition? Or is my body screaming, hey, I'm starving, because you've had a lot of processed rubbish? Is my body screaming because it says, hey, we're about to die of thirst and you haven't hydrated me? It is, and so on. So the sleep, the nutrition, sleep, and hydration for me are the biggest basic things that I can look out for. And I've this morning when I thought, well, okay, when was the last panic attack? It was because I paid meticulous attention to those baselines, to those kind of things. The other thing that I strongly recommend people to do is the 5-minute gardener. It is often enough you feel paralyzed. You feel, oh my God, there is so much, where to start. And I felt a little bit of that this morning when I got up. I felt, oh my, I need to do that, need to do this, need to do that. And then I felt my body sort of saying, and I was sort of literally relaxing back into bed when I said, hey, hang on, that's bullshit. So I forced myself to get up, have a shower, start off with that, sit in the toilet, then go down there, and it was a bit of a mess in the kitchen. And my body said, no, I don't want to do that. And I said, no, I'll do that. But what I do is I'll do 5 minutes. I don't say, oh my God, I cleaned the whole house now. No, sorry. No, 5 minutes. Never more, never less. But do that every day. So, and suddenly that 5-minute gardener who does 5 minutes every day in the garden, after a week, he will see a huge difference. After a month, his family will say, wow, we've got a nice garden. And after 3 months, probably bus tours come along to look at the garden. And that's 5 minutes. So basically creating habits of taking action. And that is something that helped me so many times by just forcing myself to do, especially those things where I want to procrastinate. And sometimes it works, and I'm getting far, far better with that in recent months and years compared with in the past. It's a skill that is perishable, so you need to practice those things, rest assured. But I mean, what is the importance of action as far as you are concerned?
Yeah. Yeah, I love the suggestions that you shared because of course, and this is someplace I start with most of my clients, like those things like getting enough sleep, even just that in and of itself makes a huge difference when it comes to your mood, when it comes to things like anxiety and depression, and just helping you to become more resilient. Because during sleep is when we process our emotions. It's when our brain has the time to restore and replenish. And so, in addition to those other needs, but you mentioned the importance of action. That is another huge thing, especially if you're somebody who tends to overthink and overanalyze things and can spend forever in the planning phase and get stuck in, organizing and making to-do lists and all of that. But then sometimes that can just be a form of further procrastinating. So, I love that 5-minute rule or anything that can help to break things down just to even, because that just makes it even just psychologically more tangible, more easier to approach rather than, and especially if you're somebody who is like a perfectionist of, I need to do this thing, but not only do I need to do it, but I need to do it perfectly.
Absolutely.
It can feel overwhelming and impossible to get started on perfection. So just that 5-minute habit, like you mentioned, or just that first step of the thing can make it so much more cognitively attainable and easier to follow through with.
Exactly. And then what I've taught myself is to actually, after doing all those steps this morning, after each and every one, I acknowledge that I've done it. Just as simple as, good, you've taken a shower. Well done. Just That's a little like that, 1 second. But that puts a little smile on my face. And you did that 3, 4, 5 times in a row in the morning, which took me less than half an hour to do various things that maybe I was not in the mood to do. And that was the smile on my face where I thought, okay, well done, well done. You've beaten that inner Schweinehund, that inner person who you're procrastinator or you're I don't know how you call these. How do you call your not so nice person that is living within Tati?
I don't have a specific name for myself personally, but I just refer to it as the inner critic.
Inner critic, good. Yeah.
Yeah. So that voice that beats you up or that holds you back.
Yeah. Inner critic. Okay, I like that. Although that is now, I rather like a more descriptive and in your face one. So no, we all need, but we all have them. These kind of these voices, and I think that's so important, and that's normal, guys. That is normal. So if you beat yourself up right now for hearing this voice, and so you're not only that voice is beating you up, but you're beating yourself up for hearing that voice. guys, you get the idea. No, this is normal. But how do we deal with this person?
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that you acknowledge the fact that it's normal, because it is. And many times it's because we have learned in some way that in order to motivate ourselves, we need to be hard on ourselves.
No.
We need to push ourselves. And maybe it's the coach or the teacher or the parent you had growing up that gave you that tough love and kind of it helped you to get things done and accomplish things. And we've internalized that voice on into adulthood, when really it's not helping us. Many times it's actually making us feel worse, and it makes us less resilient to
Very nice.
failure, to stress, because then we become even more avoidant of failure, because we think, well, if I mess this up, then not only are there the external consequences, but then, I'm going to feel terrible and beat myself up about it as well.
And I think that's so beautiful that you say that, because immediately it made me think about my to-do lists in the past. And I mean, Superman on speed would have not been able to even cover a quarter of the tasks that I set myself on a day. And then when the day was finished and there was my to-do list still pretty much only half touched, etc., it was a proof to me, see, you're a failure. Because you couldn't even do your to-do list. I mean, I look at it nowadays, you think, oh, you idiot. But at the same token, I mean, so should we get rid of to-do lists completely, or do they have a function?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love to-do lists, but I love using them intentionally, because it can absolutely turn into, like you said, this never-ending list, and then you constantly feel like you're never doing enough. And so using a to-do list intentionally means, being realistic with your expectations, and less is better, because even, when we can focus on less things that we have to do, then we actually can promote or give more attention to those things and feel more accomplished as a result. So and like you said, like just recognizing, at the end of the day, what you have accomplished and celebrating and acknowledging that.
Exactly.
There's so many different tools you can use for to-do lists, but I like anything that will allow you to separate it out by day. So whether that's writing it in your planner, a separate list per day, or I like to use the app Todoist, where like it allows you to schedule out, or if you're doing it on your calendar. But that, I think, is just much easier to approach and more bite-sized than like, having your entire week or month on one list.
Could not agree more. But I loved what you said. It is actually not a to-do list. It's an accomplishment list for me nowadays. Whilst I can actually highlight things that really are important, and maybe not rank them, but actually say, oh yeah, I really need to go shopping today for that and that. And then when I did it, wow, okay, that's an accomplishment. That's an achievement. And that is beautiful. I actually see a to-do list nowadays not as a negative, but as a way of recording my life and a way of saying, well done, Stephan. Look, out of 20 things, you actually got 18 done. Wow, look at you, man. And it's that kind of thing, rather than focus on the two. Oh my God, you failed because you couldn't do these two. So it is a complete 180-degree turn, how I approach certain tools. And I think that is again, that's a privilege of choice. We can choose how we look at the inner critic. We can choose how we conduct our life. And that is something that people keep forgetting. And I've forgotten for a long time. This is actually my choice. But no, I was always feeling that there are external forces that are driving me to do so. And my childhood is driving me to do so. And I'm a survivor, defined as I respond quickly to emergencies around me. it took a long time for me to become a thriver as someone who is not defining himself by adversity or trauma or whatsoever that has happened, but who's now actually willingly and intentionally living his life by making choices and then taking action. I think once we actually cultivate this kind of, let's take action and let's see what happens. 99% of the times, not the negative things that are in your head will not occur. Okay. So, and that is something I need to keep reminding myself every single day, because as a doctor, you learn all of the ways that people can get killed and things that could go wrong at any 1 second. That's how we do our informed consent. We tell you everything. If I was to sell you a bike and do an informed consent and tell you, well, these handlebars, when they go through the liver, and when they come off and you've got your head is flat like a pancake, I don't think anyone would ever buy a bike, but we do that in our life as informed consent, as physicians. And we also think about it in our daily life, yet most of these things will never, ever happen. So how can we stop this ongoing waterfall of negative thoughts of our body playing the worst off? How can you interrupt that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I like to refer to these 3 questions that I learned when you're having these what ifs, these catastrophic thoughts. So thought number 1 is how likely, or what's the worst that could happen? So basically, if you're feeling anxious about a situation, what is the worst that could happen? What is your mind telling you could go wrong? Really identifying and naming that. Even if you could write it down, that helps, because it's this concept of, naming it in order to tame it when it comes to fear. And that helps you to feel some more level, even though you may not be able to control the consequences, you feel some level of control over, I've identified this fear. Then question number 2 is, how likely is it? And of course, we may not always have all of the data and statistics, but we can think about, okay, do I know anybody personally that this has happened to? If I were to look at, and think about just objectively and realistically, is this something that is likely to happen? Many times, the worst case is not likely, and not as likely as our brain makes it out to seem. And then question number 3 is, how would I cope with it? So, if this worst case scenario happened, how would you cope with it? Would you be able to survive? And of course, if you are still alive beyond it, then you would be able to survive from it. Even though it might feel difficult, even though it might feel challenging, you can handle it. And part of coping with anxiety is teaching yourself that you can deal with whatever comes your way, because a big part of that fear is worrying that we can't handle it. It's going to be this huge, insurmountable, crushing tragedy that occurs. And of course, nobody wants bad things to happen. And when bad things happen, they can be hard, but they do not have to, like you said before, they do not have to define you. And they, if you have proper support, then it can be something that helps you to learn more. And you can, depending on what the situation is, you can become more resilient after the fact.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. But I think, as so many things in our lives, we don't know what we don't know. And therefore, for many people out there who are going through hard times, they don't know how powerful a person, a human next to you can be when this human is trained to listen to what you're saying, and even more so, listen to what you're not saying, and basically find out what is really going on, or maybe is a few steps ahead on the path and is able to guide you a little bit, at least, that little bit of the path. Because, trauma comes in layers, healing comes in layers. Our growth comes very much in layers. So, and I see that as one of these things. We both are ferocious learners. So I think that also applies to me learning about myself and my body and my thought patterns, etc. So I think I'll accept that just as much as a challenge as I accept maybe learning a new skill. So it is, we have got that privilege to be cognizant, to feel, man, God, if we can just actually stop, feel, and then actually play a bit with those feelings and see, okay, hello, yeah, that's how love feels like, or that's how anger feels like, or sadness feels like. And then see what kind of thoughts are coming out, and then see what your body actually wants to do with these thoughts, which actions it says. And if the end result is a drink or a whole cheesecake, and maybe, just maybe, the whole sequence is somewhere a bit stuffed up. Oh God, Tati, I mean, you're an amazing woman. I mean, you've raised so many very valid points, and it is so good that you are out there, because it's people like you who can hold a mirror in front of my face, in front of our faces, to see what is really going on. It's people like you who are asking the right questions, because the answers are pretty much already up there. I just can't see them because I'm so overwhelmed and I'm so such a mess. But those people who have helped me most in the past were those who have asked me the right questions, because my brain is there. Okay, bidding, and suddenly a lot of things got better, and this includes very severe things like my PTSD. By with a bit of hypnosis and a bit of the right questions asked, 3-4 sessions, and my emotional response to previous trauma was completely reframed. Go
Excellent.
figure. Exactly. So I was lucky there. I was lucky because I was so immediate responding to it. But it just shows, guys. So whatever has occurred in the past does not equal the future. Right now, you've taken action already. You listened to Tati and me rabbiting on for a good part of an hour here. Congratulations, you've taken action. So now what's the next action going to be? Hopefully that you actually go down there, check Tati's social media links out, and think, hey, I get in touch with her. And whilst you're down there, press the like and subscribe button, please, and tell your friends. But Tati, for those of us listening, or for those out there listening, tell us, where can they find you? What is the best place to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my website is becalmwithtati.com. I also have a podcast, Calmly Coping, where I talk all about high functioning anxiety, the topics we talked about today and more. And then I'm on Instagram at Tatiana GLPC. I have a free Facebook group. I think I also have a LinkedIn too. Yeah, I'm going to start posting there more.
It's all down there in the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast. Tati, wow. You have come a long way. You are growing, you're expanding, you're transforming. Have you got an idea who you want to be when you grow up? What is the next step in Tati?
That's an excellent question. I'm kind of stumped. I mean, I like the direction where I'm going, and I want to continue to, it's really fulfilling for me to help and reach people, to help them to understand more about themselves, to accept themselves, and to learn that there's a better way to live. And so if I can continue doing that, then that's what makes me happy. That's what I guess want to continue doing as I continue to grow.
Fantastic. Oh, brilliant. Tati, thank you so much for being a guest on my show. I had a blast and I learned a lot. You made me rethink a few concepts. So for that, I'm very, very grateful.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you so much for having me, for asking some excellent questions, and for being a great host.
Cool. And you guys out there, look after yourself and live with passion. Bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.